Hello and welcome to another episode of the O3C podcast, coming to you from O3C Games. My name is Jonathan Dunn. This is a very wide camera, and I'm joined by Chris Dow.
Hello there.
And we are going around the world in 80 games. Here we go. Before we dive into our Irish episode, I'd like to issue a request, and I'm doing so in the spirit of great Irish legend Bob Geldof. Give us your fucking money! Of course, we're not asking for money to help save millions of lives, so I don't feel it's quite appropriate to use such language. So instead, I will say, please give us some flipping money to help keep the lights on at O3C Towers. Just a few lashings of hot copper go a long way to supporting the show, and you can find details on how to support us on our website, o3c.games/support, and we would love that, please.
We would.
Lashings of hot copper is one of my favourite things I've ever written.
That's a really good one.
Here we go. Welcome to one and all being, I guess, the lovely listeners, one being you, Chris Dow.
That's how it works.
It is how it works. This is our 10th whistled stop on our tour of this great planet we call here. It's Ireland. It's only bloody Ireland. The Republic of Ruddy Bloody Ireland.
That's where we go.
Our nearest neighbours, the only country the UK shares a border with. And we're going to tuck in for a full course meal of Irish games. But first, let's catch each other up with our month's gaming activity.
Yeah, boy.
What you played, Chris?
Oh, I've played some interesting stuff this month.
I'm sure you have. School holidays are great for this.
They are, but also I don't think anyone, even knowing me, would necessarily be able to guess the trio I'm going to bring along today.
Oh, can I have a guess?
Absolutely. Although I feel like you could also have just checked and cheated.
I have not checked. I'm going to go as far out as I can. I'm going to pick three games.
3 games.
Okay. Far Cry 6.
No, but good guess.
Pong.
No.
Tetris.
I mean, that's not that weird a spread, really, for me.
No.
That's possible.
Something old, something new, something Tetris. Something new.
So this first one, a bit of a backstory to make sense of it.
Oh, here we go, tuck in.
Way back in about 2005, I think, I spent around 2 months absolutely obsessed with the MMO EverQuest. And an important caveat here, I didn't have a massively meaty PC at the time, so I wasn't playing it on a computer, but I was playing EverQuest Online Adventures for the PlayStation 2. Wow. And I played hundreds of hours of that massively multiplayer RPG on the Sony PlayStation 2 using the short-lived PlayStation broadband adapter and a combination of a DualShock controller and a USB keyboard. And it was absolutely not the optimum way to play a game like that, because performance was pretty horrible. The community was almost non-existent because no one else wanted to play it that way. The USB keyboard only worked 50% of the time because the PS2 had a USB 1.0 input and it just dropped inputs all the time, just didn't work. The Quest content was years behind the PC version, but I had a really good time. And it was basically my first and pretty much only taste of a proper community-focused MMO that I've ever played in my whole life. And over the years, I've always flirted with the idea of trying other MMOs because I like the idea, but as I got older, I've always been put off ever considering picking one up due to 3 main reasons. The first one is the potential to have missed story or quest content that I will then never see because I wasn't playing from day one, and that stresses me out as a kind of fear of missing out thing. The second, that I won't be able to enjoy the game at all unless I've got like a regular team or group of people playing, because the genre is generally not geared towards solo players. And 3, that timed or seasonal content would mean that I couldn't play other games at all, because I'd always worry that, I wanted to play Tetris for an evening, but as a result, I missed a unique raid or boss or something. So it's always just put me off trying. Now, just recently, like just before we broke up for the summer holiday, I started listening to a new games podcast called Into the Ether.
Is it as good as ours?
I think it's pretty good because it's very similar to ours.
Oh, wow.
I connected to it pretty quickly because it's very structurally close to what we do. It's 2 friends. They're talking about games they play and games they love. It's very much kind of backwards and forwards like we do, kind of bringing something to the table each time.
Okay. Can we file a lawsuit?
I think they predate us, so don't bring it up. But anyway, during the end of year wrap up episode of some time I was listening to, one of the hosts mentioned that they'd really enjoyed a particular chunk of story content in the online only Final Fantasy XIV.
Oh yeah.
And for some reason it pricked my ears, and I went, maybe I'd enjoy that. And this is a game I've heard talked about for years and years and years in different places and communities, because it's been running since, I think, 2013. But I'd never given it much mind because of all those worries I outlined before. It just never seemed like it could appeal for the things that I'd have a problem with. But for whatever reason, the way it was spoken about on that podcast made me do a bit of research, and it led to me finding out a few pretty key things about the game. Number one, you can do the numbers again. It's incredibly solo friendly. Like I would guess that about 95% of the game's content can be accessed on your own if you want. Or you can use AI companions for some of the dungeons or raids or bosses and stuff like that. It's very much set up that if you want to just do it on your own, most of it you can. The second thing, the game's expansions all work as kind of chapters, meaning that you need to finish the base game story before you can access the next chunk of narrative. So for all intents and purposes, everything that has existed in this game since its inception is still in the game in 2024. Like, nothing has gone. It's just a new expansion comes out. That's a new chapter that you can play as and when you get to it. And most crucially, not only does the game run pretty much perfectly on the Steam Deck, but the game's free trial gives you full, almost entirely uninhibited access to about 100 hours of gameplay.
Wow.
So if you want to just test it out, there's no subscription, and that could probably carry you through 3, 4, 5 months, depending on the speed you're playing.
Yeah.
So if you want to use it as a test to see, is this for me? It's really, really geared friendly to be that. And I think you can build your character up to like level 75 or something like that before it asks for any cash whatsoever, and that's a lot of game in this thing. So at the start of the summer holiday, I signed up for my free account. I went through the quite lengthy process of installing and updating the game because it's a big old file. And within the first week of my holiday, I played it for like 30 hours. And I thought, I'm just like total convert now. This is what I'm going to do forever. But I had to stop myself because I then did get that nagging feeling that was like, I do quite like playing other stuff. And I worry that the more time I put into this, the less likely I'm going to be able to pick up something else, because it's always going to be on the home screen. It's going to be the first thing I see. I'm going to just default to opening it back up. So I made myself kind of step back, basically, so I could do other stuff. But what's nice is that even though I have done that, I know that I'm not missing out on piles of content. And because I'm not playing with a gang, it's not like, oh, you're missing out on this fun thing we're all doing together, and all these other things that are just, they've taken away that sort of FOMO feel. That then if I do want to go back to it, if I want to spend just a week when I'm back at school kind of grinding quests here and there that just, take 5-10 minutes each, it's going to be there waiting for me. The character's there, it will just be saved in space for all time. A few things worth mentioning, though, about the game, like outside of the structural setup that I've already mentioned. Despite the age, the game launched originally, I think, on the PS3 and the PC, so it is ancient. It looks really good. The music, as with every single Final Fantasy entry, is wonderful. A lot of this stuff is in Theatre rhythm, so I kind of recognised it and be like, oh, there's a theme I like. But yeah, really, really good music. The writing, either in kind of the acted scenes that are voiced or in the small kind of text conversation and flavour text, is all really excellent. Properly like tasty, meaty stuff to kind of get stuck into. The controller setup as well works really surprisingly well for a genre that generally is built around kind of nested menus and the expectation that you're going to have like a full suite of keyboard controls. So even that works well. Like, it's a very, very friendly game to play. And the quests themselves are plentiful, and they strike a really good balance between the kind of meaningless collect 10 of this or kill 10 of that, as well as much more story-driven exploration and combat. And that's the bit that I think the diehards of this game really enjoy, that it's like it has had this massive long story that you can still go and kind of experience the whole thing if that's the type of thing you want to do. It's just really good stuff. And I'm still not an MMO guy. I'm not even really an RPG guy. Most people will know listening to this podcast. But I do think when I get the urge in the future to dip into this kind of experience, this is going to be the one to be, because it's so welcoming and accessible. It's basically going to be free for as much as I want to play it, because unless I get really, really absorbed, I'm not going to suddenly hit 100 hours of play. And it's very respectful of your time and schedule. So as open or closed as you want it to be, it is all things to all people kind of thing, as MMOs go. So for what it's worth, it gets my seal of approval for the summer. Not sure yet if I will play that much more at the moment, at least, due to that fear of it becoming like an encompassing time sink. But it is proof positive, I guess, that MMOs can appeal to a wider group of people than I had thought, because it doesn't seem to matter what type of gamer you are, you can kind of find something that fits in an experience like this. And there may well be other MMOs that are doing similar stuff that cater for different gaming habits or likes or dislikes. So Square Enix, good job. It's a good game. I like it. Had fun.
There we go. Yeah, it's always looked really good. I've obviously all the same concerns that you do about MMOs. I think the closest I've come is playing like Sea of Thieves, and that was easily done because we had the same crew. We played together every Friday night or whatever it was, all through lockdown, and it was wonderful. And if there was some new sort of seasonal content that dropped when we were playing, and it was really fun to do that. But like that sort of seasonal stuff that is dropped into, obviously loads of games now. It's hit or miss for me whether or not I like it or buy into it. Usually I just don't. Like in the recent like Pokemon games, there's always been like limited raids and stuff like this to get a certain, like a Pikachu that knows how to do a specific move or something. I don't know. And I don't care. I don't care about that. The nice thing about like Monster Hunter was that when new content dropped, it was then in the game. So I could go do it whenever I wanted,
I think that is the thing that works particularly for me, is if I know that stuff is added and not taken away, because that's the bit that bothers me. And I think more and more games now, even if they have like a battle pass type system or something like that, a lot of them now will say, okay, you're working along battle pass A, call it, and then it might introduce a second one, and it's like, but you can carry on going, just finish up A as and when, and then if you want to do B, you can do that as well. And I think that's probably the right way to approach it, in terms of saying there's more stuff to do. If you want to play this for 1 million hours, the content is there, but we're also not taking that content away, because that's the bit that really bothers me. That I just don't have the time investment. I don't have the time to invest, kind of thing, to say I'm just going to play one game forever. So when they kind of endlessly layer new stuff, I like the idea that I could pop in a year, see all that stuff and be like, well, loads to work towards now, knowing that it hasn't been binned. Because then it just feels like, well, there's more game if I enjoy it. And I think that's a fine kind of goal to have, as long as it's not something that precludes me from being able to take part in stuff just because I'm a bit slow. What have you been playing?
Oh, thanks for asking. So, in stark contrast to last month's gaming activity for me, where I played all the games, this last month has been insanely busy with a mix of work and life and logistics. So, my gaming has been largely restricted to mobile gaming.
Oh, you like a mobile game, though?
Well, sometimes. A couple of mobile headlines before I dive into my major sort of playing points. I have hung up my ladle in Cats and Soup now, the Netflix idle game that is devoid of microtransactions. It kept me entertained daily for many, many months, but then it started to feel a bit more like a chore in the last month or so, so pulled the plug. I'm nearing an endpoint with my time on Tents and Trees, I think, having played over 200 hours and completed over 4,000 puzzles.
Christ.
But the scale of the game has got almost unplayable for me now on my phone, because I'm on like the 21 by 21 sized grids.
I'm too good at it.
No, it's not that. It's just literally the puzzles are too big. I physically can't play them without making mistakes, and it's a bit annoying. So it's a shame, because they only goes up to like 24 by 24, and I want to complete all the packs. So I might put it on the iPad and finish it off on there, because absolutely masterful game. I've also played a fair amount of Good Sudoku, which is a brilliant Sudoku game from mobile gaming legend Zach Gage, who brought us things like Spell Tower, Not Words. He co-developed Ridiculous Fishing, in addition to brilliant gaming subversions like Really Bad Chess and Flip Flop Solitaire. And Good Sudoku definitely stems from a similar pond to those later two games there, because Good Sudoku is basically his attempt to make Sudoku fun for himself, because he doesn't like Sudoku and was also crap at it. So in this game, it gives you the tools to like streamline the gameplay, and also accompanies the gameplay with some really excellent knowledge and hints and tutorials to improve your play. So that's been good fun. But the main gaming activity of my last month, and indeed my last 2 months, because I teased this last episode, it's been one of the best mobile games I've ever played. and that is Slice and Dice.
Oh, I recommended this to you.
You did recommend this to me, Chris. I think it's Slice and Dice. I don't know.
Yeah, I think so.
Is it an Italian detective duo called like Slice and Dice? Not only is Slice and Dice one of the best mobile games I've ever played, it's also one of the best roguelikes I've ever played too. It had totally flown under my radar till you brought it to my attention. There we go. It's a solo developed game over the course of about 8 years, I think. It's clearly been refined within an inch of its life now through extensive play testing and beta testing and community feedback, to the point now it's like in its 3.0 version, and it's received like a proper final release, and this mobile version too. I hope it gets the attention it deserves now and catches the internet's affection the way something like Balatro does, because it's every bit as good as that game.
Yeah.
I mean, the key to any successful roguelike is having an incredibly simple foundation on which to build, and Slice and Dice at its heart is quite simple. You have a party of heroes, and you roll dice to determine how you attack and defend a series of increasingly difficult enemies and bosses. Then the game gleefully delights in augmenting and complicating every single aspect of the game to the nth degree by introducing so many different classes of heroes and upgrades, so many different ways of evolving your party and changing your dice. God knows how many items and pieces of equipment you can bolt onto your party. A multitude of different attacks and techniques and maneuvers and spells, every colour of the rainbow. An incredible array of different enemies with different abilities and attack types, seemingly insurmountable bosses with mighty powers. There's even then just there's algorithms in the game to basically randomly generate characters, items, enemies, bosses. So it is literally an endless game.
Yeah.
Every single run you do will be drastically different, and it means you always need to keep your mind on its proverbial brain toes to keep evolving your strategies and attack plans if you want to make it to the end of a 20 battle run. And in the words of Brian Butterfield, that's not all, because in Slice and Dice, you can also challenge the game on several different difficulty levels, from the chilled Heaven mode, which sees you pick a selection of blessings to start your run with, to give your run all kinds of nice boons, like increased damage, or enemies start weaker or poisoned, or your items and level up choices are more and better. And then it goes all the way up to hard difficulty, unfair difficulty, brutal difficulty, and hell, where you'll have to pick curses to start with instead of blessings, which will make your runs very, very hard right from the off. And then, in the further words of Brian Butterfield, that's still not all, because Slice and Dice has about 1 billion different game modes to choose from. You can do your standard runs in classic mode, or you can then do runs with a whole selection of totally different rule sets, ranging from the silly to the stupidly hard. You can also just totally customize every single aspect of the game, of the way the game works as well, for like a complete personalized, unique experience. There is a baffling amount of variety in this game. It's all achieved so successfully from being built on this incredibly refined and secure foundation. I've spent so long playing Slice and Dice because it's just so easy to dip in and out of. Like, you can probably complete a full run in about 20 minutes, but it's very easy to put down and pick up. You know where you were when you left off, so you can play in little 5-minute bursts here and there. But then obviously, like, the classic thing of having games that you can easily play in little bursts is that it is just very easy just to keep playing until your legs are fully numb and your poo has turned white in the toilet.
Desaturated dog dirt.
Thought you'd like that one.
Love poo jokes.
Yeah. Poo is very funny.
It is.
In the words of Minty. I've played through most of the difficulties on most of the modes now in Slice and Dice. I really love the loot mode, where your characters don't level up on your run. You just get lots more items and item slots to equip them, which is a fun way to build your party. Also really like the raid mode, which sees you double the size of your party and also double the amount of monsters and bosses you fight. You don't get items in this mode either, but it's really fun to manage a party so big. And despite the randomized nature of the game, there is so much strategic, almost puzzle solving gameplay in there, because all of your offensive and defensive options revolve around the order in which you take your turns, with so many abilities affecting how other abilities work. And the game is so good at showing you how the action will play out before you make your moves, so you can clearly see how everything will impact everything else before you decide on the right course of action for your turns. There's even an undo button, so you can literally play things out and then rewind if you think of a more optimized strategy. It's great because it gives you the satisfaction of playing a great strategic game, but without the pressure that comes with full-on strategy games where you're really punished in the moment for missing something.
Yeah.
The difficulty levels do get pretty stupid in Slice and Dice, but by the dev's own admission. When you start a run on brutal difficulty, you always get a little disclaimer pop up saying, "This is stupid. It's not intended to be possible." And then you pick a range of curses to start your run with. And yeah, there's a difficulty level higher than brutal to unlock if you can complete a run on any mode on brutal difficulty, which I haven't done yet. It's obviously definitely possible, but it will be down to a fair bit of good fortune with the randomization of your starting party being favourable and the different curses you get offered to choose from working a bit in your favour. And you can't just re-roll your starting conditions just over and over until you get the optimum build. You have to earn a reroll by beating levels on that run or runs on a different mode. So I found myself dipping in and out of shortcut mode, but on Heaven, which skips you straight to shortcut mode skips you straight to level 8 and gives you 4 items. And I really like that because it's just you get straight into it.
Yeah.
And doing it on Heaven, it blesses you with some great perks. It allows me to blast through a few levels of that, and I'll earn a reroll for my brutal run. And I just quite like that loop of just going back and forth because it's just really fun to play. The mechanics of it are just really fun. And now that I'm at this point in Slice and Dice, I've also been playing a lot of the endless run modes, which are also in the game, and they're great fun. There's a few different ones to choose from, obviously, but you're basically the main way they work is that you'll constantly accrue curses, making your run harder and harder, even if they're just low level curses. And then if you get to the end of a 20-stage loop, you'll restart a loop with a new party. But then sometimes you might earn a blessing to put on your party, but then you will also retain all of the curses. So you basically, by the time you're got to maybe your third loop and you're past level 60, you've probably got about 50 different curses stacked on you.
Yeah.
And then it's very hard, no matter how many blessings you've managed to get. But it means I don't know, I've always just got something to play, something to aim for. There's also hundreds of achievements to go for too. It's always fun. It's just, it's so good. I can't overstate just how good Slice and Dice is. This has been an incredible year for these smaller indie games like Balatro or Animal Well. Now Slice and Dice. All three of those games will probably find their way into my top 100 games list somewhere when I come to revising that. And I still feel like I haven't really sort of got into everything that Slice and Dice has got to offer, because there are just so many tools that the dev gives you in the game to customize things I don't even understand, but I'm sure I'll get there in time once I've, because I was overwhelmed by all of the different modes I was unlocking, but then I didn't have to worry about them. I played on the ones I liked, and then I was like, oh, I'll give that one a go, and then I learned that one, and then boom. Everyone should try it. Like I said with Balatro, it's a shame Balatro doesn't have a demo, because everyone should play that and try it. But there is no excuse not to do that with Slice and Dice, because there is a demo to try on Steam. It's free to try on iOS, with the full game being an in-app purchase. It's about £8 to unlock. It's beyond worth every one of those pennies too. Oh, absolutely amazing. What a game. Thanks for the recommendation, Chris.
Yeah, I came across it. I think it was on a list of hidden gem sort of premium mobile games. And I read about it and thought, oh, that sounds quite interesting. And it just fell out my brain then. And I was browsing Steam at some point and saw it there, and it had a proper PC port. And it was like, oh, I'll give that a go then, because I remember that. And it kind of just flick that switch in my brain to say, that's a thing you recognise,
Yeah.
which sometimes is all it takes for me to want to buy something. But I played maybe an hour of it and then immediately text you and said, this is your favourite game. So I would just recommend you grab it on mobile or however's going to work for you.
Yeah.
And you, the same evening, were like, this is very good. And then it's just been something that I know you've been playing, but I was waiting for you to bring it to the podcast to really get stuck into. Because if I brought it up, I'd be like, yeah, it's roll dice is quite good, I suppose. I couldn't do it justice because I would never have that same sort of grip, or the game wouldn't have the same grip on me as it inevitably would for you because of the genres you enjoy and the stuff that you like. So it's really nice that the recommendation was such a slam dunk. Because it really felt from the title screen onwards that it was like, oh, it's a Jonathan Dunn game.
And it is. And I'm not Jonathan Dunn with it yet.
Way!
What else have you played, Chris?
Oh, it's another left field one.
What's next on your Rando trilogy?
So I think this one, perhaps even more than Final Fantasy XIV, unless you've been stalking my Steam play history, I don't think anyone in the world would have guessed that the game I've probably put the most time into this holiday has been Rocksteady's Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League.
Yeah.
This is a game that has been universally panned by critics and players.
Of course you love it then.
And I'm going to stake my flag up front and say I do not understand why. I just don't understand why. More than some of these games where I always want to find out why things are divisive and everything else. This one, I can't see what the problem is. I genuinely can't see what the problem is. So many years after the last entry in the Batman Arkham series, Rocksteady have returned with a game that few were asking for, given that fans seem to just want all of the Batman all of the time. But is it a good time? Yeah, it is, actually. I really, really enjoyed it. The story has Amanda Waller, a US intelligence officer, assemble a team of Arkham nasties to attempt to take down members of the Justice League who have been compromised and mind-controlled by a multiverse-spanning villain called Brainiac. And I didn't care that much about the narrative, being that I have no stock in these characters or this series or this work, but it's impossible not to tip your hat to the quality of the cutscenes here. So throughout the game, every sequence is rendered in-game and looks amazing. And it's something that I only realised a few hours in when I noticed that the stupid costumes I kept outfitting my characters and crew with were then reflected in the cutscenes themselves. So it's just real-time engine. And the facial animation work, the lip syncing, the mocap, the post-processing, it is second to none. It looks sensational. Really, really spectacular stuff. The dialogue between the characters is quick and witty. And as much as people whinge about it, I think it's easily as good as something like the Guardians of the Galaxy films. It's not the highest tier of writing, but it's delivered really well and the performances are solid and it's decent. The characters are all playing a stereotype, but they are filling their roles really well. This particular Suicide Squad, as I believe it differs from the recent film adaptations, but I don't know because I don't watch them, don't care. But you get Harley Quinn, Deadshot, King Shark, and Captain Boomerang. And I'm sure those names mean something to more ardent DC fans, but I'm not a DC fan. And as I've already alluded to, I don't really care. So it's just a bit of a shrug of the shoulders from me. But even the performances from the possessed Justice League members are also really excellent. I think this is Kevin Conroy's last outing as Batman in any media. This is his final throw. And seeing and hearing these usually kind of virtuous characters get a turn in the villain's chair is actually really fun, even as someone with no investment in the franchise. All of this is to say, though, that even if the story itself wasn't the main draw for me, it always kept things moving along nicely. I was interested to see what was going to happen next. It was a nice reward when I beat a little section to get a cool cutscene. The gameplay basics, then. It is very important to know that this is not a strictly single-player open-world game like the Arkham series, and I think that's one of the biggest things that people are having a moan about. Instead, this is a 1 to 4 player cooperative looter-shooter that's vying for essentially the same audience that is currently mainlining Destiny 2 or Warframe or something like that.
Okay.
And on that metric, out-the-door failure. It's just because the things that have made those games endure for all the years that they have are absolutely not here. But if you take this game on its own merits and kind of enjoy what it's doing, I think there's a lot to love in Suicide Squad. As an additional caveat, I did pick the game up for about £15, and it's absolutely worth a punt for that sort of price. Whatever platform people may have access to, at that cost, you're probably going to have an okay time. The basic rhythm of the game goes as follows. You essentially watch one of these incredibly high-budget cutscenes. You then complete a range of broadly similar combat tasks in the open world to upgrade character traits or weapons, whilst the characters kind of banter amongst themselves. You watch another cutscene, you complete some more combat tasks. Every few hours, there's like a big boss encounter. Then things go back to the same format, and you're kind of repeating between those little sections. And I can see that being a problem if the main things of combat and traversal were boring and tedious, but they are really exciting and fun to learn and fun to master. Because the 4 characters, that's Harley Quinn, Deadshot, King Shark, Captain Boomerang, they've all got their own weapon loadouts, they've got their own movement abilities. So getting around this city, Harley Quinn swings and grapples, a bit like Spider-Man. King Shark can leap miles into the sky and kind of crash down on tops of buildings. Captain Boomerang can throw his namesake and then teleport to its destination in a flash. And Deadshot can use a jetpack. And all of those abilities are really important because this is a very vertical game, like easily as vertical as Spider-Man on the PlayStation or Crackdown back on the 360. It's all about being in the sky, up on buildings, up on rooftops. So you'll spend most of your time kind of leaping or flying or swinging between sort of different structures. And just like those games I've compared it to, it's really fun just to get around the place. It's a lot of fun to get around. And there is a proper learning curve too, because the first few hours with any character, you will keep falling off the roof back down to street level, and it's annoying and you'll feel it in your soul. But it's that keeps you kind of going to say, but I know I could be doing better if I just had a better handle on the controls and I sort of thought about where I was aiming for and what I was trying to do. And once you sort of lock in and really get it, it's really satisfying. The combat, I think, feels really good too. The game has the classic 2 weapons and a grenade sort of setup. And even though a big part of the experience is meant to be kind of endlessly upgrading what you're carrying to improve your damage output by like 0.1% here and then the area of effect by 0.1% there, you can ignore almost all of that and just get stuck into the core spread of shooting, countering, lobbing grenades, building up and activating special moves, and just all these different bars are essentially feeding into each other to keep you always moving, always kind of attacking and always doing stuff. There's loads of other upgrades and modifiers you can fiddle with if you want to, but this passes what I would call the Halo test for me, in that the core suite of abilities is fun to use and everything else is kind of, you can take or leave. If you enjoy the idea of just shooting and throwing, again, it feels good. That's the main part of the game. The story will probably run about 15 or 20 hours for most people. I'm right near the end of it now. It's maybe 30 at the most if you're asking about with side tasks and collectibles, because there is other stuff to find and do. At this stage, if you've had your fill, off you pop. But if you want to get stuck into the metagame of endlessly tweaking weapons or unlocking more outfits along like a battle pass, there's a lot more content there for you. And there's essentially like infinite quest generation after the battle formats you've got used to from the main game if you want to carry on. But all of my praise has kind of led me to think, perhaps rhetorically as a question, what is everyone's beef with this game? Because I just don't get it. Like, people are whinging about the writing. Like I said, some people don't like kind of the interpersonal sort of bantery type thing. But most of that criticism that I've dug up is just people going, yeah, character's a bit too woke, actually. And if that's your main criticism, you can just fuck off. Like, it's so vapidly empty and boring to hear that as a criticism. People are complaining maybe about a lack of variety in the activities on offer, but I like quite boring games. But a lot of people, I do wonder, like, they are quite samey, but are these people complaining about a racing game having too much driving in it? Because if you're playing a game that's about jumping around and shooting, it seems counterintuitive to suddenly say, I am quite bored of jumping around and shooting. Like, that's the point where do something else then. Like, you don't have to play it. And people are also complaining about kind of the post-game not adding enough extra stuff. But in that case, again, you've played for 30 hours. Go and do something else. Like, there's many other games. There's many other things you could play. So I don't get any of these complaints, honestly. It's not my favourite game of all time, of course. But I've had a really good time with it every single time I've picked it up. And I think it just exemplifies more how out of step I am with modern gaming.
Yeah.
If this is kind of, you know, the red flag that everyone has just stood up and gone, unplayable, an unplayable mess.
I think you mean the Rick flag.
But it's silly. And I don't know what people want from like a pulpy comic book story, for a start. And I don't get why people are surprised that a game marketed as being about traversal and shooting is mainly preoccupied with those two actions. And the last one, I don't understand either why people seem to think that a game has to live or die on its ability to entertain indefinitely. You know, we've played so many games that last a few hours and then we go, what a great time. I don't even need to play it again. I had such a nice few hours. And that is still a really successful video game. So again, at the end of 30 hours, if you've decided that's enough, that can be enough. That's all right. You're allowed to leave. Like, yeah, it's not the next Arkham game as people may have wanted, but I think it is a really decent game. And especially if you get it on sale, you will absolutely get your money's worth, whether you're playing it solo like me, whether you do have a set of pals that you're playing it with. You can just enjoy it until you don't and then move on, because that's gaming, isn't it? That's what it's supposed to be about. You do things that are fun until you're not having fun anymore. And then there are quite literally 40 billion other experiences you can tap into. So yeah, I think it's good. I think it's good. And this will absolutely be one of these ones that everyone online shouts at me about for some reason on social media. But bring it on, because I know more than you.
Oh, I enjoyed that. It's true. True.
It's absolutely true. Proven,
it's absolutely true, yeah. Yeah.
Oh, have you got anything else that you've been playing?
I do. In fact, another game is... in fact, another game I played is also a mobile game, but I played it on the Steam Deck.
Oh!
And this is a game called Bleak Sword.
I'm really trying to think. Is it like black and white?
Yeah.
And they're almost like stick figures.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I was trying to picture the screenshot. Right, carry on.
That's the one.
I've never played
one.
Tell me about it.
I'll paint the scene better for you in a minute.
Yeah, please do.
Well, basically, it's sort of black and white and just stick figures. What else have you played? I first played Bleak Sword on mobile when it first came out, and I was immediately taken with its like brilliantly stark aesthetic, its bite-sized action, its Souls-like gameplay. But I also hated controlling it on touchscreen with like those digital controls, and I put it away until I could play it with a controller. Fast forward to now, Bleak Sword DX is available on pretty much everything, and I played it on Steam Deck after picking it up in the summer sale for a couple of quid. So what is Bleak Sword? Well, Bleak Sword tasks you with fighting through 120 stages as 12 bosses and increasingly hard and complex enemies. Each stage is a really small little arena, with each of the 12 worlds having a bit of an environmental twist to them, whether that's riding on horseback, wading through water, slipping on ice, or being in booby-trapped filled dungeons.
Booby!
Tits and boobies.
It's funny.
It is. Get your lads out for the tits.
Yeah.
Each stage will spawn several enemies for you to fend off, and your little hero attacks with a sword, blocks with a shield, and can dodge and parry. It's quite simple. And then you'll earn XP for winning fights, which you can use to level up your hero. You'll also find items to equip to boost various stats. If you die on a stage, you will lose your items and current XP, and in classic Souls fashion, you have one chance to beat that stage again if you want to reclaim them.
Oh.
Bleak Sword really boils down this little core loop to its very bare basics, and it's really successful in doing that. Anyone expecting any more from the game will probably be a bit disappointed, but then the DX version does introduce several new modes to play through, different difficulty levels, and obviously there's achievements to aim for as well. But the thing that sets...
Calm down.
But the thing that sets Bleak Sword apart a little bit and adds a bit of spice to the experience is its aesthetic, which is just really, really cool. Like, you know how Octopath Traveler has like the 2D HD look, where they have those lovely pixel art sprites rendered in a sort of pop-up, tilt-shifted 3D world?
Yeah.
Well, Bleak Sword sort of does this, but with really low-res sprites, akin to something you might see on like a really old Amiga or Spectrum game, or something like VVVVV. It's like it's I don't know exactly what it is, but it's maybe like 6x10 pixels is like that's the canvas there. But it's amazing how much variety and detail you can get out of so few pixels, and it looks great when presented like this. And that like shallow depth of field tilt shift effect works really, really well for these little miniature diorama like stages, augmented by really nice bloom and CRT filters. And it's all presented in this stark monochrome, with red being the only colour splashed throughout, and it looks gorgeous, especially on an OLED display.
Of course.
I mean, obviously the graphics don't enhance the gameplay, but it definitely does enhance the experience. It's a really, really good little game. I'm really glad that I got the opportunity to play it, and it's staying installed on my Steam Deck because I do want to play through the DX mode, which is a slightly expanded version of the original of the like the classic game mode, which I had a great time playing through. It is quite tricky. I've just completed it on normal. There's obviously 2 or 3 other harder difficulty settings should I wish to do that. But yeah, Bleak Sword, it's not anything groundbreaking. It is essentially bottling a specific gameplay experience.
Yeah.
But it does that very successfully. So if you like Souls-like games or action roguelikes or classic arcade games, keep an eye out for Bleak Sword. It's only about £8 full price. It's often on sale as well, and it's really, really good.
Bargain. Sounds a bargain. It looks lovely as well. It was, obviously, I could just about conjure the image of it when you started talking, but reminding myself, it looks great. It looks really, really good as, you know, a really, really considered aesthetic for how to take something very, very limiting, but to kind of push it in quite a modern way of presentation. You know, it's got that sort of, like you said, the tilt shift thing is really, really stark and striking.
Yeah.
So yeah, it looks great. I've put it on my wish list. I will inevitably buy it and install it and never play it at some point in the future.
Fantastic. I look forward to that.
Do you want one more game? One more game. Finger on the pulse game.
Is it? Is it?
Yeah.
Oh, thank goodness. Thank goodness you're here to deliver a finger on the pulse game.
Oh, I think it's fascinating that Panic, the team behind our beloved Playdate, have now also been responsible for publishing the 2 funniest video games ever made. That is the wonderful Untitled Goose Game by House House, and the very, very recent, we're talking a week ago, hit Thank Goodness You're Here, as you've just alluded to, by the team Coal Supper. It's so good. I played through Thank Goodness You're Here in 2 short sessions this week. I absolutely loved it. We had a conversation very recently about how exactly you make a funny game. And I think it's interesting that within Panic's quite small publishing catalogue, they've supported the development of Goose Game, like I said, with its slapstick, active kind of rack 'em up and knock 'em down punchlines, but also now, thank goodness, is much more direct script and sight gag-based comedy, because they're essentially the only 2 routes you have for making a game funny.
Yeah.
You know, the only other one is just things happen accidentally and we laugh at what's gone on the screen, which is completely unscripted, but you could apply to Dark Souls sometimes. You know, you could apply to co-op games when kind of things go wrong between you and you're trying to organise some sort of raid or whatever. But these 2 kind of routes are about all you can do if you're trying to write jokes for a game. For my comedy taste, I don't think any game has made me laugh as hard with scripted intentionality as Thank Goodness You're Here.
Yeah.
It's very, very us.
It is.
Really, really, really us. So the setup, you're a little yellow chap. You are sent to the English town, the fictional town, I can add, of Barnsworth to meet with the mayor. And you are faced with an indeterminate wait in the mayor's office. So you wander outside and then get basically infinitely drawn into helping the residents of the town with odd jobs. You can jump with one button, that you can slap with another. That's it. There's no other input. The game unfolds like a very soft point and click adventure, mostly linear. It's got no inventory management or item puzzles. You're just traversing the town, solving problems, and then bouncing from one very strange vignette to the next. And it is very, 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 very funny. And it's also, and this is the big caveat I'm dragging in here, it is very, 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 very British in a way that I think might make international travel very, 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 very difficult. That's not to say people in other countries wouldn't be able to laugh at the accents or the delivery of certain jokes or anything, but there is so much national and regional specificity in the humour that when the credits rolled and multiple localization teams were credited, I couldn't help think how impossible and possibly futile it would have been for, say, like the Korean or Russian teams to take the playful language and the sight gags and the delivery and referential humour of this game and repaint it to work for a culture that just will not know about JML in-store advertising or Biffa bins or a generational obsession that borders on sickness with the Queen of Hearts, Lady Di. Like, these things don't apply in other countries and places. I don't want to spoil any specific jokes, although if you use any social media, I'd venture you've probably seen a few choice cuts if your algorithm regularly serves you video game related stuff, because it's the type of game that is very easily gone viral for the little snappy jokes and silly things and whatever else happens. But I would urge everyone from the UK especially to just go and buy and play it on whatever platform you have. And, you know, anyone international with an interest in comedy games, maybe watch the trailer first and then collect whether or not the humour kind of really translates or appeals to you. But it is absolutely one of my favourite games of the year so far. I had such a good time with it. Georgia sat and played through it again the next day. So I finished it one day. She watched me do that, and then the next day said, "Can I play through that as well?" Brilliant. So I've seen it all twice and still laughed out loud at huge parts of it.
Yeah, I really want to play through it to show Sammy. I've told her a couple of little bits from it, but yeah, I played through the whole thing on Sunday morning. I was on my own.
Perfect.
Sammy was away with Nora for the weekend, and it is the funniest game I've played. I think it's more successful than Goose Game for me, because I think the gameplay doesn't rely as much on trial and error like Goose Game does, where it's still great fun, that game. But yeah, I just had a fantastic time throughout this. It is like, as soon as I saw the game starts, and like how most games start, it will show you the little save icon, and it'll be like, don't turn off the game when you see this icon, it's saving. And for Thank Goodness You're Here, that little icon is that little black and white stripe that you used to get in the top corner of the telly when an advert was coming. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And just seeing that, I just went, well, this is a 10 out of 10.
Yeah.
And like that, there's so much about the aesthetic and the way they present it, especially with like some of the cuts, like the some of the real footage, like the live action footage that's cut in and on the menus and stuff like that, that just, it brings such an immediate flavour to the game that made me just want to laugh. It is so good. It's interesting you mentioned the thing about the translation stuff, and I think that there are some things that, especially some of the purely visual gags, that won't translate.
Yeah.
But in terms of the actual translation of the dialogue, I wish that I was fluent enough in another language to understand how they're doing it.
Yeah.
Because, like, from my experience, certainly passively seeing how Sammy's interpreted stuff into sign language, like, so much cultural awareness is taken into consideration when translating. And when, especially if she's done, like, she translated she was interpreting a panto, and she had to translate everything before, obviously, to translate everything into BSL before then sort of performing it. And BSL is an entirely literal language.
Yeah.
There's no double entendres, there's no puns. That's like 90% of a panto.
Yeah.
And so Sammy had to basically work out, okay, so what's the purpose of this joke? What is it trying to say? What's the laugh? Is it doing anything for the narrative? And then had to think, well, what's an equivalent joke in, like, that would work for in BSL for a deaf community to get the same experience? And that is basically the entire process of translating Thank Goodness You're Here. And I have no idea how you translate something like anything we've just alluded to, that is so sort of culturally linked, and that's why it's funny, and it relies on me finding certain things familiar to find it funny. Surely you just have to you'd have to rewrite the entire game.
Yeah.
But then in order to make those things work, you'd have to draw on different reference points. So you'd have to change all the assets in the game and other things that would mean that, that people playing it in a different language, it would all still resonate the same. I've no idea, but I wish, I really want to find out, because it's exceptionally funny. I like. But then, like, there is a lot of sort of British stuff that has just sort of transcended things. Like, even Northern stuff. Like, you think of, like, Alan Bennett. Like, Alan Bennett's, like, talking head stuff. Like, there was Me and my mate always had a bit we used to do. There was like, this is the stereotypical Alan Bennett thing, which is just everywhere in this game, of like, you know Mavis. well, she was going down the shops the other day, and she went to get some bread, but they sold out of bread. But they had some nice buns, but the buns were all mouldy. But the mould actually led to her being able to develop a penicillin. but it didn't make her any money, so she was destitute. But she did find some happiness with a loved one. Then the loved one died, but she was quite happy on her own. And then she died. but she went to heaven. But it was full of Christians. That sort of thing.
Yeah.
There's so many little throwaway lines in Thank Goodness You're Here that it just made me absolutely piss myself. I don't want to spoil anything, but I will give one. It was just such a throwaway thing, and it's the sort of thing where, like, I think you could play through it and not hear it, because it relied on me going back into a certain location, and I went into it was like a bakery or something, and the shop owner just said, "Oh, I'm sorry, madam, we've run out of butter, so it'll be vegan. Is that okay?" And the woman just goes, "Vegan? No, I'd rather shit bed." So good. It's so good.
The one that I will spoil comes in the first 10 seconds of the game. It basically opens with showing kind of like a range of adverts connected to Barnsworth, the town.
Oh yeah.
And as like the come to Barnsworth thing, it just has a scene that goes friends, family, pit, and it just has people descending into the mine. Just really good. So good. Yeah, it's great. It's great.
It's so good.
Everyone should go and play it.
Yeah. The delivery on repeated gags is extraordinarily well done.
Yeah,
repeated gags is such a difficult thing to balance as well. Like it's one of the biggest problems with sketch shows. Is like a sketch show will get renewed for like a second season, and then they repeat an idea or they try and build on it. Like if you think of like Mitchell and Webb, which I absolutely love, and the Number Wang, and they kept on iterating on Number Wang for the entire 4 seasons that sketch show ran for.
Yeah.
It didn't stretch that far.
No.
It didn't stretch. It didn't stretch far at all. There's only so far you can sort of raise it before it becomes dull. But they seem to really, really nail that, because there's a couple of repeated gags that you come back to and you go, it's it's a contender.
It's a good one. It's a really good one.
It's a contender. Around the world in 80 games. Ireland.
Republic of Ireland.
Have you been to the Republic of Ireland?
No, I haven't. Oh,
it's fantastic. I had a wonderful time in Dublin when I went.
Yeah.
Every day I'm Dublin. No. It's a reference point I don't even get.
Oh, that's good, though.
I'm looking forward to talking about the games of Ireland. But before we do that, Chris, do you want to know some facts about the country?
Every month, I look forward to hearing facts about a new country.
Well, as you probably know, Ireland is the most successful country ever in the Eurovision Song Contest.
Yes.
Ireland has over 30,000 castles.
Does it?
Yeah.
That's like one on every street corner. Pretty
much. It's pretty impressive for a country that is now technically a neutral country, so I don't know what they're doing with them. Halloween was invented in Ireland.
Was it?
Yeah, yes, it was. And of course, it can only be known as an Irish coffee if it's an alcoholic infusion of Irish whiskey and coffee. Otherwise, it should technically be known as a sparkling drunky dunk.
I can never follow this.
Chris?
I always have to follow this with something semi-serious. I feel like I've got the hard sell now. The short straw. What are those phrases?
One of those. What are games, Chris? What are all games, Chris?
So, game development from the Republic of Ireland is quite slight. The adventure games, the Dark Side
It's actually
Detective...
pronounced Slancher.
The adventure games, The Dark Side Detective and its sequel, A Fumble in the Dark, are both developed by Galway native Spooky Doorway. Romero Games, which is the development house founded by John and Brenda Romero and creators of Empire of Sin. They're not Irish by heritage, but they have chosen to base their studio in Ireland, so they work out of there now. Void Interactive, responsible for a very positively received first-person SWAT shooter available on Steam called Ready or Not. I hadn't heard of it, but it's got overwhelmingly positive reviews. That they work out of Dublin. And Gambrinus, who found decent success with their tabletop-inspired games Cardpocalypse and Guild of Dungeoneering, are also from Ireland's capital city. Now, searching across Wikipedia and Moby Games, as I usually do for these segments, there is a fair amount of studios creating mobile games of no real note. Not trying to be mean or cast aspersions, but you know how it is with mobile stuff. So Tribal City Interactive and Blue Bear Technologies are collectively responsible for a swathe of mobile hits, massive inverted commas there, like Shave Santa, Sheep Launcher 2, Puppy Doctor, and Action Bowling.
Wow.
These teams, alongside a few other mobile contemporaries, are currently headquartered in Ireland as well. But interestingly, in terms of impact, the greatest games output from the Republic of Ireland isn't a specific game at all, but rather a physics solution called Havoc, which has been used as industry middleware for collision and material physics calculation and rendering since as far back as 1999 in London Racer, which we mentioned in our Netherlands episode because it came from Davalex Games.
Yeah.
Since then, Havoc has become inescapable, especially for games developed during the 360 and PS3 era, where it can be found. This is a non-exhaustive list in the Assassin's Creed games of the era, a range of Battlefield, Call of Duty, Far Cry, Halo, Destiny, Killzone, and even Half-Life 2, all the games from those series. It was used in the Dead Space trilogy, it was used in the Dark Souls trilogy, it was used in Skyrim, and it was also used in more unexpected titles like the London 2012 Olympics tie-in, Little Big Planet karting, though not its platforming cousins apparently, and, did not know this, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild is also Havoc powered.
That's mad.
Yeah, absolutely mad. So suffice to say, the Havoc engine, developed by the creatively titled Havoc Group, has been a pretty vital puzzle piece in global games development for many, many years at this point. Now, in choosing things to play, I could have copped out and just played something that had this tangential connection to this month's country, but you can wait a few more minutes to find out what I actually explored. What did you choose to play, Mr. Dunn?
I played Guild of Dungeoneering.
Oh, is it good?
It's really good. It's really, really good. I first played it a few years ago, actually, when I was travelling back from a festival in North Wales in the back of a camper van. I was rushing back because my poor little pooch needed to go to the hospital, and I wasn't driving. Context that you don't need, but I was playing it on my iPad. It kept me very entertained on a somewhat stressful journey for about 5 hours.
Yeah,
and I hadn't really thought about the game since then, to be honest, until I was browsing the games developed in Ireland and spotted it and was like, I'm absolutely going to pick this up again and give it another go. And much to my delight, there is now an ultimate version of the game on Steam.
Lovely.
And presumably other storefronts too. It includes all of its DLC and a bunch of quality of life improvements and other just smoothing out the creases. It makes it the nicest, slickest and smoothest way to play the game. And I did try giving the original mobile version a go because I had it, but it was a bit too small a screen for it, and I got a cheap Steam key for the game, so here we are. Cut all of that. Guild of Dungeoneering presents itself as a pen and paper dungeon crawler with lovely biro sketched artwork and a clean presentation that makes everything very clear to see what's going on, and the aesthetic allows a lot of charm to be put into all of the drawings and animations. You slowly build and expand a guild of dungeoneering that plays hosts to many a dungeoneer who you can then send out on increasingly treacherous missions to earn money to continue to expand your guild. There's a nice sort of tile builder side to the expansion of your guild, although there isn't any real strategy needed. It is just plonk a new room wherever you want. You don't get bonuses by building things adjacent to other rooms or anything like that, which would have probably been quite a nice feature, actually. The missions and quests in Guild of Dungeoneering take the form of turn-based, card-based, randomly generated, dungeon-based crawls. And when you're exploring, you have a hand of about 5 cards to place on the board to basically create the dungeon, and it then charts the path for your next turn. It could be like a room card that contains maybe something within it, or just an empty room to provide passageway to another sort of pre-existing room in the dungeon. You also draw and place enemies and rewards, so you have a good bit of control over your experience, and you also need to be careful how and where you place the elements, because your hero will automatically draw their path of where they're going next, and they'll be drawn towards various things, and you want to try and tackle easier monsters sooner, build up your XP and loot before you go thundering into the harder enemies. And so there's a lot of tactics involved in sort of how you explore, which is it's good fun. But an undo button would be nice. Because sometimes it's really, really tricky to like foresee the route your Dungeoneer will take or how that will change until after you've placed a certain card. And then, of course, it's too late.
Yes.
And when you enter a battle in Guild of Dungeoneering, you draw a whole new set of cards for your fighting. And these will range from different attacks, magic spells, shields, and the like. And you'll alternate turns with the enemy. And you need to empty all of their health bar before they empty yours, as you would absolutely expect. Your deck will then expand depending on what loot you find in a dungeon, and the different types of Dungeoneer come with a different starting deck too. So you'll need to be clever, pick the right hero and the right type of loot when you're on a mission, depending on the enemy types and the mission type. I mean, the good thing about all of this is that your strategic thinking is always quite short form. You don't need to massively think far ahead, and the missions are nice and short. If you fail, you can try again with a different strategy quite easily. If you win, you can crack on with another one. And on it goes as you develop all of the different sides of the game, and it's a really good time. Like, much like I was saying about Bleak Sword, like Guild of Dungeoneering, it's not breaking any boundaries in terms of what it's doing. But what it is doing, it's doing really, really well, and with a huge amount of charm. Like, I love the aesthetic in the game, and I also really love the audio work in the game. It's got really good sound effects. They're always quite funny. The whole game is accompanied by a sort of bard-type narrator that will chime in with little rhymes when you unlock new things or play new missions. It's just brilliantly whimsical. And the music is really good as well. Like, it definitely warrants playing with the sound on, even if you are just playing on your phone.
Yeah.
There's a huge amount of content here as well. The progression in the game is possibly a bit on the slow side, and so I haven't actually unlocked anywhere near as much as I hope. Well, I haven't made as much progress as I would have liked. There is a fair bit of grinding involved because you need to save money to build all the different types of things in your guild. But then also grinding is a traditional part of Dungeoneering, so it sort of fits, and it's fun taking on missions with a slightly different aim of like making the mission last as long as possible to make a bit more money if you're saving up. So you like deliberately don't trigger the end condition, so you've got a bit more time to make as much money as possible, and that's quite fun doing that. Even if it's replaying an old mission. I haven't touched the DLC. I haven't got to that bit yet, but it seems like it's good and plentiful. I've got the game installed on my Mac, and even though it says it's not supported on 64-bit operating system, fortunately, it runs absolutely fine, and it's a nice game to have running, playing bits and bobs of it between other bits and other bobs of work. I definitely recommend the game. I'd say it feels Irish, certainly in its like its whimsical, comedic way of presenting. It's got bundles of charm, much like Ireland, and like my time in Dublin, it is thoroughly good crack.
Well,
what have you played?
For me, with the pool of games created specifically in the Republic of Ireland a bit limited, I scanned through the big list of games that I could attribute to that country and decided to check out a full tetralogy of racing games published for the PlayStation 1 because they were all developed by Funcom Dublin. Now, Funcom were in operation from their Dublin branch for just over half a decade between the years of 94 and 2001, and in that time put out exactly 4 games, and I played all 4 of them.
Mm.
Their first release was Impact Racing, which released worldwide in 1996 for the PS1 and Sega Saturn, for all the sickos out there, which is us too. Although the 32-bit machines have been on the market for about a year and a half at the time, Impact Racing feels distinctly early gen in both its design and visuals. So it's a stage-based combat racer. You're essentially cruising along very thin tracks, almost on rails. You're trying to destroy competition rather than overtake them, and your goal is always to beat the stage, arcade racer style, by hitting checkpoints to extend your time, whilst firing your machine guns at racers ahead of you on the track, dropping mines behind you to harm those behind on the track. And if you fail to make a time gate, it's game over. It's really, really simple. The visuals are very limited. They're very blocky. They're very kind of low polygon in presentation, the racers and everything else. And you're battling along these very linear tracks that exhibit pretty severe popping along the horizon as well. So it's not a looker. The music is very much the dance and electronic music you'd expect in a game released for the PlayStation in the mid-90s, which is nice as a throwback, I guess. But it's the type of game that is decently fun to revisit for half an hour, but has no substance to it whatsoever. It's not going to be on anyone's kind of like, got to return to that list. I don't think it has any actual roots in the arcade, even if it feels like it, although write-ups on Impact Racing are pretty limited. There's not a huge amount out there, but it does very much feel like a developer cutting their teeth by trying to create a sort of arcade at home experience and what was still pretty cutting edge hardware at the time of release. It was not that far out from the original port of Ridge Racer and stuff like that.
Ridge.
If Impact Racing was unremarkable, Funcom Dublin's next game in 1999, much, much better. A kart racer called Speed Freaks, or Speed Punks in the US. It got a localization for some reason. And it fares much better in all regards. At first glance, you might remark a little unkindly that this looks every bit the kind of We Have Crash Team Racing at Home, which itself was kind of the We Have Diddy Kong Racing at Home.
Yeah.
But Speed Freaks actually beat Crash Team Racing to release by a couple months, which suggests a kind of weirdly parallel development between Funcom Dublin and Naughty Dog, both doing their own thing, but ending up essentially releasing the same game at the same time.
Yeah.
Crash definitely wins in terms of pure content, because it's got an adventure-style mode much more closely mirroring the single-player campaign of Diddy Kong. But Speed Freaks is a really good kart racer. It's a lot of fun to play. It's got really nice visuals. It's got a characterful cast of racers. It's got well-designed tracks that feel really good to drift around. I did struggle at first to get used to the way it handled, not because it's particularly tough to control, but because boost isn't something you build up through power sliding, but rather something you need to fill using collectibles on the track, which takes some getting used to when you're kind of hardwired for Mario Kart.
Yeah.
But everything clicked after a couple races. I then kind of started dominating the early difficulty tracks with snaking drifts, and it's just a really good B-tier kart racer. It's nothing special. It's not going to overthrow the greats, but it is a good time. I think of all their games, this was the one I had a memory of, not necessarily to play, but I'd seen maybe on a demo reel or in a magazine or something. And as a kid, it had stood out enough for me to go, oh, Speed Freaks. That looks like someone I'd be into as like a 10-year-old. Released in the same year, so 99 as well, came Funcom's next foray into racing. But this time, this is a licensed motocross game titled Championship Motocross, featuring Ricky Carmichael, everyone's favourite motocross racer.
Oh, yeah.
Now, motocross racers today do reasonable numbers because Milestone, who did the Hot Wheels game quite recently as well, they develop MXGP and Monster Energy Supercross games pretty much back to back every year. They have pretty much like yearly entries and have done for a long time. But I'm not sure what the market for Supercross was like in the late 90s. I don't know if it was a big thing. I don't know if it was a big deal. I cannot remember. The Championship Motocross as a game is marketed as a far more realistic take on motocross than obviously Speed Freaks was to racing. But the physics here are trying to capture kind of the sideways racing of bike sports and doing their best with kind of the limited hardware they're on. In execution, it still feels a bit lacking because whereas more modern motocross games are all about kind of deforming terrain that asks you to carve the mud on the track almost like you're playing Wave Race, the limitations of the PlayStation mean that the cornering is pretty bland. It's a flat texture. You're sliding backwards and forwards over it. Nothing is changing lap to lap. And whilst it's perhaps a bit more realistic in the hand, it doesn't capture the drifting thrill I had with Speed Freaks, which seems odd given that they must have been worked on pretty much concurrently if they came out a few months apart. So it's likely the same team did both games, this and Speed Freaks, and this is just not as fun. It's definitely a case. We've had this conversation recently about a realistic art style aging a game far worse as well, because the stylized graphics of Speed Freaks scales up really nicely to a massive display with its big flat shaded polygons and the characters really popping out the screen. But poor old Ricky looks a bit muddy and a bit wooden with his very sharp elbows and gritty texturing from the PS1. And there's nothing really wrong with it. You know, the whole game is fine. But whereas both Impact Racing and Speed Freaks approached the racing genre with a certain playfulness, I think the licensed grounding of Championship Motocross leaves it just feeling a bit flat, especially when you're returning to it 25 years on with the benefit of any sort of modern genre hindsight. It just doesn't really hold up, which is not their fault. It's just, you know, that's how time works. Then finally, as a swan song for the company, in early 2001, Dublin Funcom returned with a follow-up to Championship Motocross, and it was basically the same core game with the same cover star in old Ricky Carmichael, but now it had 2001 on the box. That's the only difference. You know, it iterates a bit on what worked and what didn't in its previous entry, and it kind of just calls it a day. You know, it's not a lazy release in any way. There's more content, there's more licensed riders, there's more bikes, more tracks, so everything is bigger and better. Basically all the stuff a motocross fan might have been interested in back in the early noughties. But it's very hard to get excited about this sort of release now, in the same way that no one is looking back and splitting hairs over 2 mid-generation releases of FIFA. You know? No one is going like, 97 was the one. No. It was 98 actually on the PlayStation that really pulled it out. They're just old football games at that stage. And I think for this, it's very similar. It's like, it's a bike game. It's a slightly better bike game. They're basically the same. You know, if anyone is desperate to play a PS1 era bike racer, this is the better of the pair because there's more stuff in it, but it has all of the shortcomings I already identified. They still apply here. Sadly, 6 months after the release of Championship Motocross 2001, Funcom Dublin were shuttered. Although Funcom as a parent company do still exist and operate out of Oslo in Norway. So maybe we'll catch up with them in the future if we make it to Norway on a world tour. But yeah, the Irish contingent of the company is long since dead. But there we have it. Funcom Dublin, 4 races, arcade combat, kart racing, and a duology of realistic motocross sims. You can pick your poison with your PlayStation 1 emulator and, pour one out for Funcom Dublin.
So realistic, you'll be picking your teeth out of the dirt.
Is that what the box says?
Yep.
That felt like sort of 90s marketing.
It did, yeah. Rad. Thoroughly rad.
Yeah.
Do you want to know where we're going next?
Oh, yeah, it's your turn, isn't it? Yeah, where are we going?
Yeah.
Where are we going?
France!
We're going to France. France is massive. There's a lot going on in France, I think, for games.
There's a lot going on in France. But yeah, including the Olympic Games right now.
Yes.
And the Olympic Games have just finished at point of recording. At point of release, Paralympic Games are going on. So it's...
still relevant then. Still relevant.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
There we go. There we go. Go to France.
Bon voyage.
Adieu.
Bonsoir. Adieu. To you and you and you.
Yeah.
That's addressing our 3 listeners.
In France.
So there we go. That was episode 10 of Around the World in 80 Games. It was Ireland. We played some games from Ireland, and they were games from Ireland.
Absolutely.
Next month is going to be France, and you never guess what? We're going to be playing some games from France, and I'm sure we're going to be playing some other things as well.
I reckon.
In the meantime, check us out on social media at O3C Games on everything. Follow us, like us, subscribe to us, and join us here same time next join us same here, name, text, the version, very reputation as same time next month.
Yeah.
Be in a different house then.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Stop.